few words and welcome you all here today. He's well-renowned IFA Cavan chairman, has a fantastic lineage there, right back to the NFU from his right back to his father's day. He is the most prominent county chairman and one of the most strongest speakers at IFA National Council. But just to say a few words, probably to show you how important the O'Rourke families are, just quickly. I remember about 5 years ago, I was over in Copacabana representing IFA, and it was one of those mornings where I had only just got kind of a list of what was happening at the meetings, and I had to go really early. And by good luck, I was in there, and on the walls of the Copacabana building, there was a fantastic piggery there from Germany. I think it was the Bavarian area, and then there was a sheep farm from the Charolais area in France. And then there was this picture of luscious green grass with a fantastic dairy herd. And as your eye drew down to the very bottom of that there picture, it says, Lara, County Cavan, the O'Rourke family farm. You put your hands together for Mr. Jim O'Rourke.
Thanks, Addo. I don't know where I can go after that, Addo. Other than I just want to welcome everybody here this morning to the Taste of Cavan. I want to give a special welcome to Liz Wall, our president of the ICA, Matt Dempsey, the outgoing editor of the Farmers Journal, and who obviously doesn't need any introduction, I'm sure, because he's photographed in everybody's house around the country. And John O'Callaghan, who is the chief executive of the ICA as well. Look, this is a very important day for, I think, the primary producer from Cavan, who is obviously the primary producers of all the stuff that's going to be on display out here today. And the Taste of Cavan, and I think we had a very appropriate start off here this morning with a beautiful breakfast, obviously provided with the staff at the Kilmore Hotel. And basically it's a kind of a showcase for what agriculture is and agriculture in the county is, that we produce a quality product, and I think it's very important for us today in IFA, and that we can have an event at this that we can show our wares, and that people appreciate the quality of the product that's being produced locally. Look, I haven't a whole lot to say other than I just want to thank, we'll say, all the people that come together here, we'll say, to put this event together. I want to give a special thank to Allo here for, he basically was the IFA man that helped to put all this together. We have council members, board be the Enterprise Board and Cavan County Development Board, and there was an awful lot of work put this together today, so I just want to, we should show our appreciation to everybody for the event. Look, we have a full packed day. We have our Minister for Agriculture coming at 2:30 to officially open the event. And there were obviously a big line of events all day with celebrity chefs doing special dishes on each commodity. Just with that, I'll just hand back to Addo here, and just want to thank everybody, and hope you enjoyed the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Just to give you a quick biography on our three distinguished guests. First of all, we have Matt Dempsey. Now, I think I'd only embarrass the man if I could give the biography that was given to me in relation to Matt. And I think it's only fair that we all know him, as Jim said, as editor of the Farmers Journal. He has got honorary doctorates from UCD, and he's the head of newspapers and everything like that, but I think that doesn't say anything about the man. Over the last 25 years, he's been seeing us as farmers and as rural Ireland through many different crises, from the foot and mouth disease to BSE, and he's been a clear light for us all there to ensure that we knew what direction it was, and he travelled and looked at best practice in all types of farming. And that says an awful lot about the man, and a person that a lot of us as county chairman or commodity chairman can phone him and ask him for advice, and he's a very sound person to be able to inform us like that, and we're glad to have you here today, man. Liz Wall is the president of the ICA, an organisation that goes back over 102 years. She's the first Wicklow president from an organisation. She was elected in May 2012 this year. It's an organisation that has over 11,000 members. It's gathering up about, I believe, 25 members on a daily basis at this stage. And we have a great thanks to the ICA, whether it's electricity or whether it's running water we have throughout rural Ireland. The ICA were very, very strong advocates behind that. Today, Liz is in an organisation that is as what we call cool and as trendy as ever, where you had a programme in RTE called ICA Boot Camp that has some of the highest figures ever. So you can see the organisation that she's behind. I'd like to put your hands together for Liz Wall, please. And our last distinguished guest, who doesn't need any introduction, and I want to thank him. I'm going to ask you to come up then. Sorry, Liz. The last distinguished guest is Eddie Downey, and he's the IFA Deputy President. He stood in for John Bryan, who had a meeting with Brendan Howland this morning, and I want to say thank you very much for that, Eddie. Eddie is the Vice President. He has a distinguished career within the IFA, from Meath County Chairman to the Business Chairman, where he distinguished himself very clearly. He is also a farmer, as Matt Dempsey is, which really they know the heart of the whole situation. He's a tillage, beef and poultry farmer, which is vitally important, Eddie. And he is what do you call also on the current member of Chagas as well. I'd like to put your hands together for Eddie Downey, please. I'll ask our distinguished guests maybe to say a few words at the end, if that's okay. But what we're hoping to do at the moment is to put out questions. We'd like you to, we're asking about 3 questions from the audience for our distinguished guests. And then we'll put them to our distinguished guests after that. Would you please just say your name and a brief question, rather than any statements, if that's possible at all. Have we any questions you want to ask first? First of all, for our 3 distinguished guests, if we would just start the proceedings off. Where do you see agriculture post the new cap?
Post the new cap, well, first of all, we have to get the new cap and we have to get that put in place, and we have to get the budget associated with that put in place. But presuming we get all those things in place and we get a favourable deal for Ireland, and there's a lot of question marks over the favourable deal. We had 4 meetings around the country last week where Minister Coveney and John Bryan spoke about the interstate cap and all associated with it. And a good deal is not as simple as just saying a flat rate payment covers everybody. It's not as simple as saying that we hold the current system that we have in place. It's about getting a balance between pillar 1 and pillar 2. But if you move beyond that and you move to the next stage, food, we have 7 billion people in the world. We have resources right around the world are shrinking on a daily basis. And you see your man George Soros, he's one of the greatest investors ever in the world, one of the most successful investors in the world. He's buying land out of a face at the moment. He's just travelling all over the world buying land. There's one criteria surrounds that land, is that it has access to water. You know, anybody in Ireland this year wouldn't be too worried about that because we have plenty of access to the water. But he's buying that land, he's a shrewd investor. Why is he buying it? He's buying it because he sees it as a shrinking resource. There will be serious demand for food. There will be serious demand for food out there for the next number of years with that expanding population. But we have a problem. Even as we speak, grain prices are going through the roof, yet poultry prices are not rising. Pig prices are not rising, and farmers are not getting a decent return for what they're doing. We should see those prices rise. Milk prices will rise because cows are being killed off all over America at the moment. So the milk price will rise down the road. Now, when will we get that back out to farmers and back into farmers' pockets? That's the crucial important thing. I'm just finishing this piece. There was a guy called Thomas Malthus, and he made a statement. He said that the world's ability to feed itself will be seriously compromised over the next 2 generations unless we took serious action about it. And the people who produce food would be, he saw them as the new kings or the oil barons of the world. The only one problem with that statement is that he said it in 1798. We're still waiting for that moment, we're still waiting for the time when we as farmers, as primary producers, get a return for it. That's the battle that we face as we go forward. I think that's why I'm enthusiastic about the future, I'm enthusiastic about demand for food, but I am worried that the primary producer may not get his fair share.
Do you want me to say something? Yes. Yeah, okay. In aggregate, I think I'd have to break it down by enterprise. And I think the most startling one is to look at what has happened across the world to those with reasonable climatic conditions and milk production. And I think there's very little doubt when you look at what Ireland has been held back for 25 years, I think milk production will double, probably within the next 15 years, give or take. I don't see any way out of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we went in with Glanbia into the farm in Kilkenny. And at the moment we're trying to discussions with Connacht Gold to see if there's something we can do in this vague part of the country to see if there's another farm where we can actually measure the cost of expansion and also try and isolate out some of the pitfalls which have become fairly apparent in the Kilkenny one. On the question of cereals, I think for those in the pig and poultry business, to import the starch, the cereals, or the bulk of them, and import the protein, and export the resulting product, whether it's pork, bacon, or poultry meat, requires a special set of circumstances which not everybody is going to meet. And I think we can see that every time there's a crisis or a problem, we see another erosion of producer numbers, especially on the pig side. I don't see legislation coming in sensibly to regulate prices as long as there is a feeling across Europe that Europe will be self-sufficient in these products anyway. We clearly need something to happen on the milk side. We have 13 individual Irish processors supplying dairy products to Tesco. This is simply not a sensible way, in my view, for farmers to organise themselves. On the tillage cereal side, we are steadily losing competitiveness, both in the cost of establishment and in the reluctance of Europe to go along with some new technologies that are there. And I think this erosion of competitiveness will be serious for those who are in tillage production. As regards a CAP and the future of it, I think Europe has also come to realise that in fact food security is now important. I remember going to a conference not that long ago when the British Minister for Agriculture got up at a huge audience of British farmers and said, we really don't need your products, we can always import them if we want. That day has certainly gone, and I think Europe itself is reappraising what is the role of agriculture within their society. From a farmer's point of view, I think you have to be optimistic. The only caveat I'd add is to have more farmers over 80 than under 35 is not a sensible way to operate a business either. And I think we're going to have to see some fundamental changes there if if we're going to get a sensible development of the industry. That's broadly it at this stage, Alan.
We just feel from obviously the outcome of CAP as we would feel, we would hope that the primary producer, we would hope that they would be protected, and we would hope that we as consumers, we are involved with our food, and we are promoting buy local, buy from your local producers. That's all.
Sorry, just like to ask a question. There's no question about Irish farming being able to expand, and the world population is expanding. How do you think will Irish farming address the issue of slurries, and without addressing this issue, farming cannot expand under the nitrogen directive, just either solve the problem or destock. So how do you see Irish farming addressing these issues?
We're under restraints. We're going to continue to be under restraints. European consumer demands the product that's produced, or the product that they get on the table, meets certain standards. Now, there's a double standard in that we'd like equivalence of standards right across for the products that's imported into Europe in comparison to the products that we produce, because we don't have that at the moment. And our products are trying to compete while being produced at in the highest cost society and with the highest environmental regulations. But if you look at those regulations are there, I think there's going to be. We're finding more ways, and with continuous research, we'll find more ways in which we can manage our business within that. I think this country has massive potential to expand, and if you look, anybody drives around the country, there's a lot of land there that could be expanded upon. A lot of the intensive industries could be expanded. But you're right, tonight there's a problem with it, but I think there will be systems developed whereby the energy produced from these products, or they're recycled in some other way. But if you look at the food and the food produced here in this country, and you compare it on a carbon content, from a carbon content point of view, the food that's produced in Ireland per kilo has the lowest carbon content of any food produced anywhere else in the world. And yes, we're putting regulation and controls on Irish product, and it's the same for right across Europe. European product is lower carbon content. If you want to protect the planet, if you want to protect the world, the right way to do it is not burn down rainforests. It is not clear rainforests and grow grass on ground that can barely grow it, or grain on ground that can barely grow it. You have to maximise production where you can do it at the least cost to the environment. And here in Ireland and in Europe is the right place to do that.
In relation to the slurries, I would draw a distinction between the slurries and the greenhouse gas. On the nitrate side specifically, on the ruminant side, the number applying for the derogation up to 250 kilos of organic nitrate per hectare has not been enormous, and there haven't been huge problems. So I think if that level stands, I think it will allow very significant expansion. I agree with you completely. I think the greenhouse gas is an entirely different argument, and I think it's inevitable that there will be a reassessment of the initial proposals that have come from Brussels. And I don't think there's much point in farmers getting uptight about it, because I think a lot of people will get uptight about it across Europe and in government before farmers have to face the issue. As regards the expansion of the intensive sectors, firstly on the pig side, the Dutch have somehow under 1 million sows, I would have said. It would be 700,000 or 800,000, something like that. They're producing about 15 million pigs a year. We have about 150,000 sows, so they have about 6 times the number of sows in an area the size of Munster. So far they're able to cope with their slurry, but I think, and you know better than most people here, there's a whole technology pricing structure that has to be put in place if we're to get serious expansion on that side and on the poultry side. So I wouldn't see the environmental constraints in an Irish context as coming to bear on actually limiting output. I think what they will come to bear is on insisting on farmers meeting certain standards. Part of the problem, in my view, is the varying attitude of local authorities, central government and departments. And these keep shifting, and there are different local regulations. But I think overall, from an environmental point of view, I think Irish agriculture is in a very good place when compared with other intensive areas in Europe, and I don't think that will be the main constraint towards an expansion if economic circumstances allow it.
I think Matt has already covered everything I was going to say.
One of the questions, and I'll start with you, Liz, is how do you convince the Irish consumer to buy Irish?
Well, years and years ago, there was they had a shopping basket on the television, and we can't do that anymore, so we have joined forces with Love Irish Food. We have several fairs in Arena where we ask the Love Irish Food members to come to our members. We also produce a leaflet we send out to our members. ICA, if we support a campaign, ICA get behind us. We are in the process of going to work with the Craft Butchers of Ireland. We're hoping to do a whole big campaign around that. We encourage our members to shop local, to buy local fresh products, go to the local butcher, go to the local communities and build up the local communities. That's how we're doing it. We brought in the cookery book. We are recommending that all the food in it is cooked by local products. It is now number 11 in the charts in 2 weeks. So we don't have a problem with it because members get behind campaigns like this.
To be honest with you, I really feel strongly on this one. I don't want anyone to exhibit native loyalty to buy from me because I'm Irish. I mentioned, as you mentioned, I'm in beef and tillage. I produce beef for the specialist Italian market. The Italian supermarket comes to the farm every 6 months and they see, are we meeting the protocols that they want, for which they pay me a modest premium. We were in Italy on our holidays last year, and I just couldn't believe it. There on the menu in a goodish restaurant was "and Irish beef," and specifically mentioned as Irish beef. So I don't want loyalty based on mediocrity. I want the Irish population to say, this beef is being sold in the best supermarkets and the best restaurants right across the high-income areas of Europe. That's why we should buy it. The fact that it's Irish is a bonus, and we know we're helping our own when we do. Likewise on the dairy side, why is Abbott, Wyeth, or now Nestle, Danone, they're all here buying Irish milk powder because they know they can rely on the quality for sales across the world. Likewise with lamb going to France, poultry on the fresh trade going across into Europe. And this is the only basis. We're exporting 85-90% of what we produce, depending on the commodity. I want the Irish public to take a view that it's labelled correctly. We know where it's coming from, we trust it, and we know that other people in other countries similarly want it and trust it on that basis. And I think that's the only sustainable way we can build up a loyal Irish and international population for our food. We have too much to lose, in my view, nationally, by having a kind of jingoistic approach, saying if you don't buy Irish, you're not Irish. If you don't buy Irish, and it's the best product at a reasonable price, then you're being foolish. But that's the way it has to stand, in my view.
4.5 to 5 million people in Ireland, 500 million people in Europe. We're Europeans. That's what we have to look at ourselves, that's what we have to start from, and that's what we have to work from. But that doesn't stop us being parochial, looking after our own, buying our own products at home and making sure that we buy as many of them as possible. I agree with Matt in this whole area. Kerrygold was the flagship, it was the top of the shelf in German housewife will buy Kerrygold butter first. If it's not there, she buys something else, but if she sees Kerrygold, she buys Kerrygold. Why? Because top, and pay 20% more, Matt tells me for it. They'll pay for that premium quality product. But not alone there, we have the Kerrygold is there, but I was in Germany recently, and Jim was with us. We saw the Irish beef is now on that top shelf. It has moved. When I started going to Europe first and looking at European supermarkets, the Irish product was on the bottom shelf. Please take it away. It's rubbish. That's what was being said. That was the message we were giving out there. Anybody who wants it, just take it. It's only rubbish, but we're just shoving it and just getting rid of it. Now our product has moved steadily up those shelves. It is the top premium product right across Europe. Germany, Italy, Holland, they want our beef. You go into the best European restaurants, and where they're producing beef, they're producing carpaccio, is that what, I think that's what they call it, raw beef, raw Irish beef being sold, and that's a delicacy. Now, the big problem we have for our producers here is, when we brought our chairman, and Jim was there, and I remember him trying to eat this stuff, and he couldn't understand the taste of it, he couldn't understand, and most of our lads couldn't understand why these people would eat this as a delicacy. They were paying a premium price for it, therefore we should supply it. But we had to realise that when we came back home, it's that type of beef we need to produce here. It is no good anymore producing over-fat animals and sending over-fat animals out there, beef out there. Those consumers don't want it. They're the 500 million, not the 4.5 that we have to sell to. I believe strongly in what we're doing here today. Food fairs, local food markets, talking about local produce in local areas, crucially important. I believe strongly in farmers' markets, not because they shift the volume of product. I believe strongly in the organic sector as well, but not because they shift a huge volume. But what they do is they create the taste among people for quality product, and people become more discerning in what they buy, and the more discerning they become in what they buy, I believe they will buy the best product that's available out there, and I do believe that's Irish.
Thank you.
I'd just like to ask, in this county in the last 10 days we have seen another poultry plant go to the wall. Like in an environment where there's an awful lot of imports of poultry that is questionable in the standard in which it's reared and questionable in the whole quality, can there be nothing done to at least level the playing field, like that we're comparing leg with leg, and that our own product is given a fair chance to compete?
Yeah, well, look, when I started in the poultry industry, I produced hatching eggs for Cobb, the grandparents for Cobb. But when we started first, all those eggs were hatched in Kildare, and they were mostly sold to the market here at home. Now, every one of those eggs get onto a truck, they go to the UK. In the UK, they're separated into 2 or 3 different groups, and they're sent to Holland and Germany, and they're hatched there. And some of those birds end up coming back to Ireland, but most of them end up being moved all over the world. That's the nature of the business we're in. That's the nature of the poultry industry. It's a huge industry, but it's a very cutthroat industry. Trying to keep that industry alive for the next number of years, and I can see grain prices staying reasonably high for the next number of years. I can't see, we have there's a shortage of grain at the moment. I don't see next harvest correcting that. Next year's harvest correcting that fully. So I can see grain prices staying up there. We have got to get a product price back, and the people who sell our chicken on the market have got to look at it in a much more organised way. Now we criticise the beef factories because we say every Thursday or every Monday that they all come together and meet and they set the price of beef or from us as farmers. But they don't go the other way around and set the price when they go to sell it. Obviously, we couldn't say they do because the cartel or the competition authority would jump down our throats if we said it. But we criticise on that basis. They say they don't do it. But the poultry industry just seems to be hell-bent on beating itself into the ground, competing on price with one supermarket after the other, and if you don't get that contract, you're out of business. So you have to take whatever you're going to get for it. That steamroller has got to stop. The brakes have to be put on it majorly, and we have got to find a way that we can return a decent price back to and the processor has to make money. And you're absolutely right. The processor going broke, going out of business. Cappoquin, now, I have to say about Cappoquin, and my wife's a wonderful woman, and I know the people involved here fairly well. The writing was on the wall for Cappoquin for a long period of time. I hope the solution that's put there now will lead to some sort of form of a future for that plant. But again, I worry, is it starting to put another group back to compete, looking for markets of people who have already established markets, and going to put another competitor on the marketplace that's going to pull back down the price or stop the price rising? That worries me.
I don't know enough about the poultry one to talk sensibly about it, but a few things do strike me. Even between here and Northern Ireland, you have completely different botulism regulations. You have vaccination widely available in the north, fully licensed. I presume some of it's being used down here, but it's under the counter. If it is, it's not a desirable way of doing business. There's whole substantive transformation where you have mush, you have frozen poultry coming into the Netherlands, get a sprinkle of breadcrumbs or whatever it is, it's suddenly a European product coming in here, totally different, not just rearing conditions, but the totally different administration of medicines, drugs and supervision. So there is a clear difference in approach there, which in my view is wrong. So then the food service area, I still think that they should be compelled to label food accurately, that they should be subject to spot inspections, and there should be, if a guy can be put in prison for 6 months, or for 6 years for importing, was it peppers or something from China, and yet guys can describe poultry as Irish on their menus in either butchers or restaurants, when everybody knows it's Brazilian or Thai, then I have a real difficulty with that as well. So I think there is a lot we can do within Europe if there is sufficient steam ahead of pressure built up to actually get sensible labelling, identification and follow through in a supervisory way. And the other last one, as I would see it, is that the whole role of producer groups has not been adequately addressed. Now there is something in the latest CAP reform proposals where they will be given more bargaining power. But everyone has always recognised, even the most free market economists have said that large numbers of producers selling to a very large, small number of very powerful buyers such as supermarkets, they're going to get ground down. And this is precisely what has happened, so we shouldn't be surprised, but what we should try and get is some kind of legislative framework that gives us real bargaining power and at least evens up the scales.
We feel that we have to put in stronger standards. We have to get labelling in place and a fair price for all the producers before we can move on further.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have a question here for Matt. I brought up in our lead some months ago, and it's in relation to the topic that he raised here today on the age group of farmers over the 80s. Now, seemingly nobody put in any wee slip of comment in relation to that issue that I raised in our lead that day. But to inform you all, what it was about was some form of retirement scheme and installation aid for young farmers. The whole topic is taking place in the context of the thing happening without a mechanism being in place that it can happen. Way back in the 1960s, we had the Farm Retirement Scheme that was operated by the EU. It was, as Matt knows, Directive 160 and Directive 161. Where the farmer retired, he got a pension, and it's the same as there was a farm plan for him to expand. And it is the same as initiated at that time by the then Advisory Service, ACON. Now, I think, Matt, that something's going to have to put in place if we want to reach the targets that are set out there down the road with 2015. Because these things just won't happen, because the older people out there has to have some security. The other one point that I want to raise is in relation to, say, beef production and expansion. We're told in relation to expansion, well, is to increase by 50% between 2015-20. That is excellent, but there was a survey done at the Plough Match, and Farming Independent published it, where they interviewed dairy farmers down the south on that occasion, how much did they intend to expand by? Well, with the difficult weather conditions we had here in 2012, they were having second thoughts, and they said it would only be by 10%. The other issue I want to raise, which is a very, very important one, we've seen what happened to milk prices in 2009. They fell through the floor. Why did they fall through the floor? They fell through the floor because the Americans, corporate, it's not family farming units there, they are overproducing. And when prices go to a certain level, that their costs isn't covering, say, the level of production, they start slaughtering the cows. Now, as a result of that, in 2010, we had milk increases. 2011, everyone was sailing. But then what has happened again is the Americans have got into the scene again and have increased production. Now they're slaughtering again. So milk prices is going to go up now surely for 2012. In conclusion, Chairman, I would make a suggestion that for the younger farmer out there that's making a financial commitment to his future, his wife and family's future, and for them to be educated, he would need to have a minimum milk price of 35 cents per litre. Now, if it's possible, say, for Europe to look at that situation and give these young farmers an opportunity that they can have viable units. We see what meal prices has gone to, through no fault of the Irish farmer. It's markets out there that's increasing that. So I conclude, Matt, maybe you have a line of thought to express for what I have raised here today. Thank you one and all for giving me time to voice my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Pat.
Okay, Pat raised a number of points. I really have a problem in this area where we see farmers wanting to retire, which is fine, decided to lease out their land, which I've no problem with. The IFA have negotiated this as a 20,000 tax-free income from leasing, that's fine. But then we see side letters all over the place saying that the single farm payment, no matter what comes, must be washed through the hands of the active farmer and also end up with the guy that's leasing the land. I think this is really outrageous, and I can see no reason why somebody should get leasing tax concessions and then insist on getting the single farm payment that's intended for the guy either feeding the cattle or milking the cows. That's a political stalemate there. I'm delighted to see Brendan Smith here, with whom we had such cordial relations when he was Minister for Agriculture. But I'd be interested in his view on the political feasibility of doing something about this. I was listening to Simon Coveney the other night, where he's insisting, he's certainly wanting strongly a 25% top up in the single farm payment, taking the average of 270 for guys up to 40, and that they'd have for 5 years. I think that's a sensible suggestion. And I think that combined with the leasing income and some kind of sensible changes in the succession laws and tax exemptions and so on, and you could get some kind of sensible movement on land. As regards a minimum price, I certainly don't see a minimum price path being set at 35 cents a litre. It may be unpalatable in an area like this, but ultimately high grain prices are very favourable for Irish milk and beef produced off grass, especially milk. And that, in my view, is why there is such a swing in a lot of the old liquid milk areas to producing off grass, much lower costs, and as we demonstrated the other day, very little difference in margin, and I think the margins will get tighter. As regards the United States, you're absolutely right. Milk production did boom in 2009 because grain prices collapsed. If you've got 80% of the world's milk being produced from grain, and you have a system of guaranteed prices, then if grain prices collapse, coupled with the distillers' byproduct from the ethanol program, then you will have an explosion in milk production, and it's not surprising that cows are now being slaughtered. So that's where I go. I think under the new cap, there will be some movement to put in intervention, export refunds, and its private storage scheme at some kind of price when a price collapses, but it certainly won't be at 35 cents a litre. If it's at 25, I think that's more realistic. And we would publish it with a 25 cents as an emergency measure. As long as it doesn't happen too early, Irish dairy farmers who are not overexposed to the banks will not go bust. Continental and American farmers will. So I do think we have an inbuilt advantage there.
Yeah, Pat, I think, look, you raised a number of interesting questions, but the age of farmers, look, we've always had an age, that's been the nature of agriculture. It's difficult to get people to transfer farms on, difficult to get young people into it. The colleges are full. A lot of young people out there interested in coming into agriculture. I have a son in Kildare this year. His sole aim is to come home to farm. And whether we can make space for him and make that work, or whether he has to leave the country and farm somewhere else, or what he has to do, and I would hope he would travel and see other parts of the world before he does come home to farm. A retirement scheme, well then, if he's the young fella coming home, I'd have to be looking at the retirement scheme. I'd be saying no thanks, Pat. Okay? I don't want it. What I do want is incentives for him to come home to farm. A system put in place that will encourage him to farm and make him more viable. Why? Because one, I want to be able to farm with him. If I have to retire, then I can't farm with him. I want to farm in partnership with him. Since he was a kid, he ran around behind me, behind my boots around the yard, and he was running after me everywhere he went. Now he's 18, I'm running after him. But that's the way it should be, and that's the way I want it to be. I don't think a retirement scheme for farmers is the right way to go. I don't think people should retire anyway. That's my basic principle. I think we should, it's not in the nature of farmers to walk away. We're the type of people that go out every day. We like to do what we do. Our golf is walking down the field. And who was it said? One of them said that playing golf was a good walk wasted. Well, walking down through a field of cattle, that's as good a walk as I can get, and that's where I'd like to be. So that's my thought on it. Now, I think I'd agree with Matt. Look, if we worked hard to put the land leasing scheme in place, I think we can enhance that. I think we've got a number of tax advantages in that. And land leasing, everybody looks at that land leasing deal and they think, oh God, great. It gives you an incentive, a break from income tax. That's not the big incentive. That's not the big value of the land leasing deal. Everybody thinks it is, but it's not. The big value is that you don't break your term of that being a business asset. And it means that you can transfer the farm to your next generation. That's crucially important. That's why that's important. Alan,
No, we're just going to have three
you
more
want me to spin through it, right? Look at volatility in prices. We're going to get this volatility, and Matt's quite right. Low grain prices is what drove the last increase in American milk production, not high milk prices. Low grain prices drove it. And once we have low grain prices, they are competitive and they will continue to, as is European milk production. Grass is their big advantage. High grain price for the next number of years should mean a huge advantage to us. We farmed for the last 30 years with handcuffs on us on the milk side. I think it's the right time we got rid of those. We only produce 1% of the world's milk. An increase by 50% is only 0.5%. It's not a major increase. It's not going to flood the world markets. But if we can produce it at a competitive edge and a competitive advantage, that's where we should go.
We have three more questions. I think Frank Brady, he said, wants to ask a question, and then we're going to ask Calvin Martin and Fairman maybe to ask a question. And there's another question here also from one of the tables as well. So I'll ask Frank Brady first. We'll just put the three questions together if that's okay.
Thanks, Alan. As you know, at this stage, I'm a pig farmer. There's 50,000 sows in Cavan produced. It's 150,000 sows in the country, so that's including 8,000 jobs, so 50,000 is 2,000 people directly employed in Cavan and on pigs. You talk about the beef thing or the dairy thing, and I've had this conversation with Bert a lot of times. If we can go with 99% production in pigs in Europe, we make a fortune. If we go with 101, we lose our shorts. No, we have the same short run for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So that's the point of goals in prime time, so I think I have more than one shot. But basically, what I'm saying is, I don't think we can support. I don't think the Farmers Journal put enough emphasis on the pig crisis that has been there for the last 3 years. I definitely don't think the IFA do enough for us either, because we probably don't do enough for ourselves. We have demonstrations, half the pig farmers turn up, half don't. You know, the people that turn up are here today, the people that don't turn up aren't. We're in a crisis. We are definitely looking at cash flows. I have a business that's making a little profit for the last 3 years. I'm not going to say it's losing money, but I have nothing because I have a cash flow problem. I have a severe cash flow problem. At the end of every month, it's a torture. You don't go to sleep for 3 or 4 nights because you're worried about where you're going to get money for the feed pigs. That's what we're at. We have businesses there that needs help. It needs help from the Brendan Smiths, the Heather Humphreys of this world, and it needs help from the likes of Matt Dempsey, Eddie Downey, to highlight, as Prime Time did last week. The other thing we need to show is, we all got a breakfast here this morning, and we all complimented how nice the ration was. Everybody agree? The ration was nice. You go to a hotel tomorrow morning, and you get the ration. What do you do for the full day? You drink water, not anything else. You drink water, and you drink more water, and you drink more water. Why? Because it's all important. Prime Time told last week that 60% of the stuff in this country, in places like this, and delis, is imported. 30% is mismarketed. Just because Dawn or Pennies have it on the pack, it's not Irish. We've done that, and we need to do something to highlight that. And only you guys can do that for us. Right, thank you, Les.
Okay, Cavan, Macra.
How you doing? It's all coming in for Cavan Macra and the young farmers, Cavan young farmers. It's just that I'm sorry for going in late. The time we realised we're talking about young farmers and the future of young farmers. And Cavan Macra stands that 35% of farmers are actually over the age of 65 years of age. And that only 6% of farmers are under 35, which doesn't say much for the future of farming and modern farming with young people involved in it. And that Jacqueline Cleo said that agriculture has not given the future to young farmers. One might wonder what the future of agriculture in Europe is. So the installation aid was stopped not so long ago and was put a pause on it. It hasn't been reenacted. It had a huge effect on the young farmers and the future of young farmers and the handover from senior farmers to the young farmers. And it's just to make sure that the young farmers, the future is in the young farmer. And just to make sure there's not for Cavan Macra standing around.
What I would just add to that is, on the question, should more funding go from Pillar 1 to Pillar 2? There was another question here asked, what is the plan for research on poultry, both in broiler and layer farms, considering at the moment that there's no representative in Chagas anymore of one of the big four meats, and that's directed to you, Eddie, from Frank Terkin. So I'll put the three questions now.
On the board, on Chagas, look, there's 3 positions on the board of Chagas waiting to be filled, and it's a good opportunity to put somebody there from those intensive meat sectors as possible. Jimmy Brett was one of the guys that's been replaced. His term is up, and he was from the pig sector. Well, he represents the feed sector, but he's also a big producer. So we need to look closely at that. Regards research and putting people in place, I think that's up to the pig sector to come together with Chagas, and they've looked at putting a levy in place to try and generate research and get research put in place there. There's an investment that's been approved in Chagas to upgrade the facilities they already have on the big research side. I think the poultry side is different, and we haven't really sat down long enough to say where and how we generate, because of the integrated nature of the whole poultry industry. Companies, cartons or manufacturing cartons, mills, whoever, they tend to do their own research and they tend to work from that basis. How much value Chagas research can be in that area, I'm open to proposals. I'm open to looking at that. Obviously, I'd be supporting in a major way. I think there is a vacuum of knowledge there that is only channeled to us as producers directly from the companies, and we need to look back at that, and we need to look at some way of getting further information into us. Macra, look, I agree 100% with what Buddy said there in Macra. Young people, we are the future, the blood of the life into this industry. I want to see that installation aid put back in place. I want to see the 25% top up there for the young trained farmers, but I emphasise the word trained. Trained. That's where we should be. This is an industry. This is not a hobby, even though we walk in the field is a nice thing to do. This is an industry, a very professional industry, and we want good trained people in it. Frank, I've plenty of arguments, rows, disagreements and agreements with you along the way. And most of the time I tend to agree with you. This big industry, in Cavan of all places, is one of it's the most important of all industries in it. I'm talking to big producers, I'm talking to farmers right around the country. Cash flow is a huge problem. Cash flow is a huge problem on farms as we speak at the minute, but particularly in the pig sector. The bank's intransigence and inability to understand the business of farming, it just shocks me with times. I've got a new bank manager, I bank in EIB in Drogheda. I got a new bank manager last week, and I went in to see him, chatting with him, and he says, listen, what do you do? And I said, I'm a farmer. And he said, but I thought I was talking to a guy that knew something about farming. Not one iota about farming. Nothing. Not a clue. And whether he has or he hasn't a clue about farming, they haven't got the authority to make decisions anymore at branch level. When an opportunity arises for somebody to buy a bunch of cattle or buy something that they see value in, we as farmers can't do it because our accounts are maxed out and we can't get any more flexibility on overdrafts. It's simply not a way to run a business. And I say that to every small business, everybody right around the country. The small business sector of this country has been starved and torn apart by intransigence on banking side and by massive hiking costs. Frank, you said something that I thought, there's a fair bit of work after going on, a lot of work after going on labelling on the whole side, the pig side, and the poultry side to try and get more transparency on those and make them clearer. It's still not anywhere close to where it was. A lot of work done on that DNA side of things. I'm hoping that's going to bear fruit down the road. But you're absolutely right on one thing, Frank. We don't help ourselves. And that's the problem. It's the same people turn up to protest, the same people turn up to meetings all around the country in each of the sectors. It's a small group of people who get out there and do the work, and everybody else benefits from it. But look, if that small group stops going, there's nobody there to benefit from it. But we put 20,000 farmers on the streets of Dublin 2 or 3 weeks ago, simply because we want to show the strength of this industry. And it was clearly shown there. And that involved poultry farmers, pig farmers, dairy farmers, right across the sector, every sector. And the industry came out and supported it as well, because there's 300,000 jobs in this country depending on it. Thanks.
Okay. On the pig side, I mean, I find this really difficult to cope with and have over the years in the journal. The major pig farming enterprises in the country, the large family units, were founded on the basis essentially of cheap or free skim or whey for the females. That is the basis of really viable family enterprises. So that's gone. So we're now into a situation where we're buying grain at the price of imported landed material. In other words, we're paying 8, 10, 12, 15 quid a tonne extra for it, and we're trying to export product. So we can only get over that by excellent performance on farm and good selling. Part of the frustration I find is that usually actually it's the wives that ring me, and they say, and I've come across these, we're seeing family breakups from lack of profitability in what are traditionally good pig farms. But then when I try and probe from a journal point of view, what can we do? I don't get any assistance whatsoever in trying to delve into how much of a bonus are the very large suppliers getting from the Dawns or Rostaras and so on. Are there any possibility of the smaller guys, and by smaller, we're meeting people up at the 500 sows, which is incredible in international standards. Is there any possibility of them forming into producer groups, having some more disciplined market, where they can get the same type of bonus arrangement as the very large ones, and nothing happens? So the TASTE Pig Advisory Service has been probably the best pig advisory service operated by TASTE in a sectoral sense. Very good handle on numbers. We've had very good relations with them. And I take your point, Frank, when you're saying we haven't done enough. But I am open to saying, what else can we do? we've raised these topics, we've run into a brick wall, and you still see this intolerable family pressure leading to family breakdowns and real problems. And I'm really open to what we can do about it, and we have tried to an extent. We've backed the IFA, whether it's on the DNA, the visibility, the subterranean supermarket protests and everything else. But that's only going so far. It's not coming to grips with the fundamentals. I accept your point completely. As regards the installation aid fine, TASTE research on poultry. When I was chairman of the TASTE pre-runner ACOT and AFT, the poultry industry, as Eddie said, is tremendously integrated, but much more to the point, there's a whole network, and I saw them with you today, I was up at UALO, there's a network of very specialist vets. What is a general research organisation going to bring to that, where you have enormous multinationals ploughing in huge resources into very small incremental improvements in efficiencies right across from, you were talking about the carbon dioxide or feed efficiency, slurry utilisation, there's a whole range of life controls, even pre-laying nutrition for the hens. So there's a whole range of areas there. From, I think, a tax point of view, or somebody trying to be in control of it, this knowledge is internationally transferable. A poultry house is broadly a poultry house, whether it's here or in Brazil or Britain. What we do need, obviously, is people within Ireland that are sufficiently versed in the sector that they can tap into this international knowledge as it's being generated. That's easy to say, not that easy to do, but it is doable if you people fully au fait. And I'm pretty happy that the best of our vets and poultry compound feed manufacturers who they work in association with probably have the capacity to tap into this knowledge. I don't know how widely my park trader husbandry knowledge and what comes across, but it's only a few miles up the road. So what TASTE should be doing, I'm not sure. Perhaps if there's somebody there with a watching brief from a public good point of view, perhaps, but I don't see them getting involved in fundamental research. Funding from Pillar 1 to Pillar 2 all depends where you're coming from. If you've got a decent single farm payment, you say no bloody way. Why should we give some bit away to the disadvantaged area, forestry schemes, installation aid, and everything else? If you haven't, naturally you take the opposite view. It's going to be a political choice at the end of the day.
We would feel that farming now needs to be looked at as businesses. It's not a hobby. It is a business, and we would feel that the banking services see that and look on the farms as small businesses. We feel that training is critical, that training in all sorts is critical, and we feel we will be doing a lot of work on the labelling of foods in the coming time.
Thank you. Just on if there is no further questions for our panel, we would like, there's a man who's supposed to head off to the United States from Cornfin, and he said he might just tell us a wee story here just before we finish up. He's Eamon McGuire, and I was wondering if he'd come up just to tell us a wee story. He stayed from the USA, so he had to stay to tell us a wee story. Put your hands together for Eamon McGuire.
This is a story about the greatest of the Gale. It's written by John Duggan, and it mentions players from the 1940s up until the 1990s from 27 different counties. So you'd be unlucky if your county doesn't have someone representing you. It was in Croke Park, Dublin. I was on the Hogan stand to watch the semi-final of the football show so grand. John Mahan and his bannermen served up some glorious play, but they failed to conquer Dublin, who went on to win the day. And as the crowd in thousands filed out onto the street, I saw an old grey-haired man remaining in his seat. And as I passed beside him, I could see to my surprise that as he gazed around the park, the tears dwelled in his eyes. I sat down right beside him and I asked if he was well. The old man shrugged his shoulders and then began to tell. How memories come flooding back when I see such great displays. I picture many former stars who excelled in other days. For more than 50 golden years I have gone to many games. I remember famous matches and the legendary names. I thank the Lord that spared me and kept me in his care to see this semi-final between the Dublin men and Clare. I was here in the 40s when Roscommon, bold and true, were led by Jimmy Murray and their saffron and their blue. They played the mighty kingdom and they matched them man for man. I remember Geg O'Connor, Paddy Bond and Joe Cahan. I was here in 1945 when the Cork men came and won with Jack Lynch and Wishy Murphy, Jimmy Cronin and Eamon Young. In 47 and 48 it was the Cavan men who were captained by John Joe, Simon Duggan and Mick Higgins, Gunnar Brady and Gunnar Ho. I was here in 1951 when Mayo defeated me, and with that tension and excitement till a man could hardly breathe. It was the era of the great full-backs, and none greater could you find than the fearless Paddy Prendergast or Paddy Hans O'Brien. Sean Flanagan was brilliant, Tory Carney was supreme, and you couldn't stop Tom Langan when he donned the red and green. Paddy Meegan was a flyer, Frankie Byrne, oh what a chap, and the man who took some watching was McDermott with the cap. Perhaps the greatest influence on the football game I knew was the 50s famous football team, the Dublin Boys in Blue. Yet the Kerry men could match them and were never known to yield, and the mighty Mick O'Connell reigned supreme at centre field. With Sean Murphy, Kevin Coffey and O'Dwyer firmly set, and with Johnny Cullity in the goal, it was hard to find that net. The 57 winners were the loud men, brave and fine, and the captain of the champions was a clubman called O'Brien. September 1960 saw the kingdom lose their crown. They were beaten well on double scores by the famous men from Down. It was a goal from James McCartan set the Down men's hearts on fire, and when it went across the border, it was a first for Sam Maguire. The next year it was awfully with Mick Casey and Greg Hughes and the captain Willie Nolan. What excitement they enthused. But the Down men won it by a pint, and champions did remain when over 90,000 people were there to see that game. The Galway of the 50s was the team that I knew best, Jack Mahon and Mick Greeley, Frankie Stockwell and the rest. But the greatest football genius I have ever seen by far, yes, it has to be Sean Purcell, that magnificent Hume star. The Galway of the 60s were a treat to all our fans. The Donlans, the Keenans, and sure Noel Tierney had great hands. But if you ask me the greatest team, I'd really have to say it was Kerry in the 80s with Pat Spillane and Jack O'Shea. It's strange, the old man said, how all these memories last. I remember 50 years ago and forget the recent past. But I'm thinking of the other greats, real heroes in their day, who never won a title after years of brilliant play. Men like Cavan's Jim MacDonald, P.T. Tracy from Fermanagh, Kevin Armstrong from Antrim, Eddie Devlin from Tyrone, that stalwart Frank McGuigan, and that brilliant Eddie Jones, Bill Goodison from Wexford, Bill McCurry from Armagh, and the fair-haired Willie Casey from the town of Ballina. Roscommon had O'Malley, what a credit to the game. And then came Dermot Early, another famous name. Sligo had their heroes in Mickey Cairns and Nace O'Dowd, and in Wicklow, Jerry O'Reilly and Jim Rogers did them proud. I remember Andy Phillips, who never dropped the ball, and the mighty Neely Gallagher, the pride of Donegal. Bill Delaney and his brothers were Laois men of renown, and that wonder by Tommy Murphy from old Great Cullen town. I remember famous Lily White's Pa Conley and Tom Carew. I remember Ollie Trinnigan, he was a good one too. Cavan's Charlie Gallagher and Mick Carley from Westmeath, who had Nudie Hughes from Monaghan, had power, skill and speed. And let's not forget the Leitrim men and that stalwart Cathal Flynn, and sure the likes of Paddy McGarty we may never see again. Loudford's Brendan Barden and Derry's Jim McKeever were men who knew no fear. They never got a hand on sand, though they starved for many a year. The crowd had now departed and we both got up to go. The old man took me by the hand and he says, I'm sure you know, there's one I haven't mentioned yet. He's the greatest of the Gael. No words can do him justice, superlatives all fail. His majestic contribution to the games we love so dear, since August 1938, we acknowledge and revere. He brought the atmosphere into our homes. His talents were so rare. He's that great, great commentator, our beloved Micheál O'Hare. Thank you very much.
That's Eamon McGuire from Cornfin. I'd like to thank everybody here today for a fantastic audience and our distinguished guests who shared their knowledge here today. I'd also like to thank Jim O'Rourke for having us here in this county of Cavan. And I'd like to thank Majella and Pat and Martina and Gerard Finn from Cavan County Council for putting this all up and really helping out food producers. As they would always tell us all, they can't create the jobs, but what they can do is create an environment for that, and I want to thank them very much also.